This morning, Elder Chan brings us a message from God's Word
今天早上，陈长老从神那里带给我们的信息，
entitled Post-COVID-19 Christianity and Modern Culture Engagement.
关读后基督教与现代文化的参与。
Good morning and greeting.
各位早安，
It's really nice to be able to be back and fill the pulpit for Pastor Al.
很高兴再次站到讲台上跟大家一起。
It also is a blessing to be able to share the word, share the message from God.
能够与大家分享神的信息是一个福分。
There was a female reporter. He planned to meet a Christian writer, so she called him. Can we meet at Starbucks for coffee?
有一个女记者想要跟一位基督教的作家会面，就打电话说：“我们能不能在星巴克碰个头？”
So this Christian writer immediately gave her another option.
这个基督徒的作家就提了另外一个提议，
They don't want to meet, in Starbucks.
他不想在星巴克跟他见面。
So when she arrived, he explained, to her that he does not really patronize Starbucks anymore.
他就跟他解释为什么，是说他不再光顾星巴克了，
Because he believes Starbucks actually doing a lot of devil's works.
因为他觉得星巴克这家连锁店，他们有很多魔鬼的工作在里面。
You know that Starbucks is all over the world, everywhere.
我们都晓得，星巴克这个咖啡连锁店是遍满世界。
And they have a lot of revenue every year, so they champion a lot of liberal causes, around the world over the years.
因为他们在全世界都有投资，都有很多的利润，所以在许多自由派所推崇的议题上，他们都是急先锋。
And there's a lot of, people, especially on the right, or what they call evangelical or conservative right, and they react this way to a lot of companies, which is probably more liberal than they want.
在这个右派当中，特别是一些保守的教会当中，有很多的人就是用这样的方式，在面对这个世上的企业，用这样的方式来决定他们不再光顾他们的生意。
So this morning, I want everybody to start thinking, what Christians should be reacting, how we should react, to the culture, out there in the secular world.
所以今天早上要跟大家一起来思考，作为基督徒，我们如何来面对这样的一个文化，如何来生活回应。
Should Christians boycott companies that oppose, our principles, our biblical principles?
作为基督徒，我们是否应当抵制那些的商家，他们在拥护一些不符合圣经的这些活动？
So that we can pressure them to change the policy, to change their, ideologies.
然后我们想可以通过这样的方式来迫使他们就范，让他们改变他们自由化的这些议题和支持。
Or maybe we take a different tack, that we should continue to go to Starbucks, but we will be interacting with the workers and also the customer there so that we can share the gospel with them.
或者我们用另外一个方法，我们仍然去像星巴克这样的公司去喝咖啡，但是有机会与那里的雇员和顾客们分享福音。
Or maybe we take a more extreme, approach. We're just going to start opening our own coffee shop to compete with them.
或者我们有另外一个方法，我们就自己开一家咖啡连锁店，跟他们来唱对台戏。
Or we actually take another tack like, I think the Christian, cake, makers, in Lakewood, Colorado, they decide not to serve, the gay couples.
或者像另外有些人，比方说在科罗拉多这一家基督徒开的烘焙店，他们拒绝向同性恋的这些要结婚的人提供婚礼蛋糕。
So the focus of today's sermons is more about Christians a little bit confused, and also in a way within the church are divided in engaging the secular culture.
所以今天早上的讲道就是关于我们基督徒有时候会混淆的，甚至在教会里头有不同意见的，如何与我们所处的文化来融合。
It's not only just happening now in the modern churches. It actually happened in history, even in the old churches.
这其实不只是现代的现象，在历史上从前也发生过类似的事。
There's really 4 points, I want to bring forth in this message this morning. What is the broad secular culture?
今天的信息可以大体分为4点。第一个是什么是我们这样的一个大的世俗的文化？
So what are Christians? Why are Christians confused, and divided?
为什么基督徒在面对这样的一个文化的时候，有的时候会混淆和对立？
Of course, the most important point is to go back to Jesus. What is Jesus teaching? How Christians should be engaging with the culture, with the secular cultures.
最重要的是，我们要回去来到我们的主耶稣那里，看见他是怎样教导我们怎么样来面对和参与世俗文化。
And then we can learn how to act, behave now in this, today's world.
最后的应用就是作为基督徒，我们今天如何来生活。
So what is the definition for culture or secular culture?
所以文化或者说世俗文化的定义是什么？
There's really not a very clear definition, but you can include almost everything, the people, do.
这个没有一个清晰的定义，但是呢，几乎可以把我们所做的都扔进去。
So think about like arts, social networks today, thoughts, philosophies.
思想我们现在流行的这些艺术、这些社交网络、这些思潮和哲学。
Politics, economics, lifestyle, customs, education.
我们的政治层面、经济、生活的形态方式这些习俗、教育。
Entertainment, recreation, music, communication, like iPhone, media.
我们的娱乐业、音乐这些交通，我们的媒介、媒体。
And government, healthcare, institution.
政府医疗保健和这些各个这种建制。
And the food we eat, language, sport, housing, family structures.
我们所吃的食物，我们所用的语言、体育运动这些房屋这个居住条件这个家庭的结构。
Marriage, religion, technologies, and science, engineering.
我们的婚姻宗教技术、科学工程这些层面。
Our workplaces, our cities, our industry, all combined is really the cultures we're talking
我
about.
们工作的地方，我们所居住的城市，我们的工作的这个工业界，所有这一切全部包括起来就是文化。
So you can go from country to country, nation to nation, continent to continent. You can see some of those are different.
如果我们去到不同的国家、不同的大陆，你会发现这些文化之间都会有一些的区别。
And even if you go to China, in the very west, kind of China, there are actually some, culture that actually the man is married into the women in the home.
在中国还有很多完全不同的文化，有些地方是这个男方嫁入这个结婚的时候去到女方住下来。
But the key for us is focus on what is the issues, within, the culture, within the people group.
我们今天所要关注的就是在这个文化以及族群当中，他们的问题是什么？
So what are the long-standing historical, cultural issues that we face or Christian face?
所以在我们所要面对，或者说基督徒所要面对这样的一个持续的在历史当中的这样一个世俗文化的现状是什么？
Like abortion,
这个中间都是一直有这个堕胎，
so homosexuality.
有同性恋的行为。
I think the people online is not hearing. No, they can help us. Not loud enough. Okay, not stereo. Okay. So like healthcare,
这个医疗
and there's always big debate about national healthcare programs.
在美国这个全民健保总是一直是一个热门争议话题。
Death penalties,
包括死刑
families.
家庭
How many children you're going to have in the family?
你可以一家里头能够生多少孩子？
Most of the population now, around the world or the country have, or probably around 50%, couples are all divorced.
这个离婚率全世界基本上都是5-5开的。
Whether it's a Christian, country or non-Christian country, they're very, very, almost even.
其实这样的一个离婚率，在所谓基督教国家和非基督教国家都是大致相当。
So what about today's secular cultural issues?
我们今天所面对的这个世俗文化中的一些议题是什么
I'm
呢？
talking about just recent the last 10, 15 years.
也就是最近的20年，10到20年，
Maybe even within the last year or so.
也许这是过去几年当中出现的，
Constitutional right, for the LGBTQ groups.
就是这些所谓的LGBTQ 族群的人，他们的宪法权利。
In 2015, it become, legal to have gay marriage.
2015年同性婚姻成为合法。
In response to the BLM or the Black Lives Movement, now you have woke movement.
跟这个黑人的命也是命的运动相对应的有一个唤醒运动。
And then you have the cancel, movement basically within, all the social network. You can cancel somebody out and just block somebody.
在社交媒体流行的时候，也有所谓的取消运动，这可以将某个人完全的屏蔽在社交之外。
Society and network, group of people, people group now is not, physical, now become, virtual. So you have, iPhone, social networks, and everything.
从前的单一的族群人种这样划分的群体，现在变成有很多通过交流工具划分的这些群体，包括有的是用 iPhone， 有的是用其他的。
Last 6 months, what they call the critical race theory become prominent. Actually, this actually happened already 5, 6, 7 years ago, but now become prominent because of, COVID-19.
在过去的几个月其实5、6年前就已经出现了，但是因着新冠病毒这个所谓的批判种族理论突然又冒出来。
And also because of the racism issues, in the country the last probably 2 years because of some of the people get killed by the police. So the critical race theory become, a big issue, and becoming even more issue in the next 2 or 3 years, I believe.
因着过去的一些的有色人种被警察枪杀之后，这样的一个批判种族理论，现在越来越变得非常的引人关注，在接下来的几年会更加的引人侧目。
And illegal immigration is a big issue in the last 2 or 3 cycles of presidential elections.
在过去2、3个总统选举当中，非法移民问题也渐渐成为一个很重要的议题。
Yeah, Vice President Al Gore started, all this global warming issue now become the new term called climate change.
戈尔副总统当时开始的这样的一个气候变化，现在变成一个全球性的气候变化运动。
People are focusing, on, safety, health, and also wearing masks, social distancing, and vaccination. But COVID-19 become a cultural issue.
所以现在关于这个社交距离、口罩、疫苗这些争论，因着新冠疫情也变成了一大议题。
So why Christians are confused, with secular culture?
为什么基督徒在历史上在接触与世俗文化相交之中，常常会感觉到混淆？
Why Christian is actually confused about how to engage with the cultures?
为什么基督徒在如何面对世俗文化的时候呢？有的时候找不到方向。
It's not just now, it's actually historical, even before the beginning of the church, way back into probably 17 centuries ago in Rome.
不单只是现在有这样的情形，在1700多年前都在罗马已经有这样的事。
But that's because within the church there are many different ideas, different approaches.
因为在教会里头有不同的声音，有不同的应对。
As especially expounded by different Christian thinkers as well as theologians.
特别是在教会里头有不同的基督徒的思想家和神学家们。
Some of this approach are actually not grounded in in the Bible.
他们所提出的这些建议不是所有的都是基于圣经。
And you can see in the last 2 or 3 cycles of election, the church is very divided within the church about how to handle the election, how to vote.
特别是在过去2、3个总统选举当中，你可以看到教会本身就是充满了分裂。
Well, actually, if you look at, historical, approach, the church is very much focused on politics, on religious liberty.
在教会的历史上，教会一直很注重宗教的自由，特别的投入在政治领域中。
In the last 15 years, there's a few very, prominent, Christian thinker, and they wrote a lot of articles about how to deal with the secular cultures.
在过去的10几年当中，有一些的基督徒的作家们，他们写了一些的论述，如何来处理世俗文化。
Name a few, Rod Dreher and Sorab Ameri and David French and Miroslav, Wolf actually is a Christian theologian in Yale University.
这里头列出了几个就是比较有影响力的其中也有耶鲁大学的一个教授。
And they have different approach. They think differently. Some of them are very aggressive. Some of them are very passive.
他们的思路、他们的主见非常的不同，有一些的非常具有侵略性，还有一些呢非常的消极。
There are a lot of debate among this Christian writer, Christian thinkers about how to engage in what they call not culture. They call cultural wars.
所以在这些基督徒的作家和思想家们当中，有很多的争论如何来面对世俗文化？他们有的时候称之为这一场文化战争。
Their thought is want to win the war against the culture so that they can bring, religion, Christianity into the world.
他们是想能够在这场征战当中能够打赢，能够把基督教再次注入到这个文化当中。
They want to instill this idea into the political world, and Christian will win, politically.
他们有这样的理念，就是基督徒要进入到政治领域，而且在里面得胜。
So you can see a lot of struggle with even, evangelical and try to get involved, in the Republican Party or the Democratic parties.
所以在福音派的教会里头都会有这样的争论，他们要试图在共和党或者民主党当中能够赢得一些势力。
Some of the aggressive, tactic they're using is you don't turn your cheek.
有的时候他们所提倡的这些非常具有攻击性的策略，就是说你不要让他打你另外的那边脸。
Actually, they're learning from the other side.
他们事实上是从他们的对手手中学到的更多。
So strike back as hard as you can.
所以呢，他们要更有力的来回击打他。
And you basically express outrage on almost everything you've seen that is really an inflection, in the news or in the media, on television.
所以在新闻当中看到的一些新闻，常常就会让他们勃然大怒，愤而反击。
So that's why you have see all these boycotts, is a protest, a demonstration, even from Christians.
所以在很多的地方，包括基督徒的团体当中，常常会有这种抵制活动、抗议活动、游行活动。
As a strategy, they want to imitate the other side, all the outrage, culture, cancel culture, woke culture, and victim culture.
他们事实上在效法他们的对手，从这个取消运动，从这一系列的民运当中，他们采取他们的策略来回击。
Unfortunately, sometimes you see, fight and quarrel among, Christians within the church. Not only just outside the church, within the church.
甚至有的时候，我们看见教会里头基督徒团体之间不是于外人，他们之间也有这样的争论、这样的争闹。
I think there's a selfish motive in there. They want to retain political power.
我觉得这里头有自私的动机在里头，他们要取得政治上的权势。
And also want to retain, or preserve personal lifestyle.
他们也带着这样的目的，想要能够延续他们现在有的生活方式。
And chase what we sometimes call the American dream.
这样他们可以继续的来追寻他们所谓的美国梦的生活。
Happiness, wealth, and health.
就是快乐、财富、健康。
With this kind of aggressive approach, they will use actually, different kind of rhetoric, sarcastic rhetoric, mocking the opponents.
在这场对抗当中，用各种各样的策略，包括嘲弄对方贬损对手
name calling,
这个辱骂
using condescending languages.
用那种居高临下的口气说话。
Does this remind you who would do that all the time?
你感觉这提醒你，让你想起哪个人了吗？
So historical engagement.
在历史中是怎样面对的呢？
Church really started, in a way, right after, Jesus, went up, back to, to heaven, and then when, Peter stand up and preached to 5,000 people, the church really was formed, created.
教会的开始其实是在耶稣升天之后彼得站起来讲到有3000人信主，那一刻开始了现代的
But
教会。
church has never been accepted by the Jewish people or by the world at the time.
在那个时候，教会从来没有被犹太人和当时的世界所接纳。
Church has been, or Christian has been persecuted and
基督徒
killed and chased, by the Roman, soldiers, by the Roman Empire.
基督徒那个时候都是被迫害、被追捕、被杀的，被当时的罗马政府。
But actually, it's chased by also, persecuted by the Jewish people also.
不但是被罗马政府当局，也是被犹太同胞追杀。
Paul, in his previous life, Saul actually chased after the Christian and tried to kill all of them and burn them.
使徒保罗在他信主之前叫扫罗，他就是积极的投入到逼迫基督徒的运动中。
But in 312 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine declared, Christianity is legal in Rome.
但是在公元312年，康斯坦丁大帝就昭告说，基督教正式成为合法宗教
So。really, you can say that the church coming out of the closet at that time.
所以教会就从这个地下进入了地上。
And now they become legal, so that they now can promote, they can, basically evangelize, they can grow.
所以呢，他们可以公开的来传福音，来扩展。
Over those, hundreds of years, church transition evolved into the dominant religions, in the Western world.
在这接下来的几百年当中，基督教就慢慢的发展，成为了当时主要的宗教，
And also become a very, very big political force.
渐渐的也成为政治当中不可忽视的一股力量。
That's why you can go to the Vatican, which is a country by itself. The church is a country by itself in Rome.
所以现在你可以去梵蒂冈旅行，那个国家就是个教会，那个教会成了一个国家。
Since then, the church tried to retain their political power, the force.
自从那以后，教会就一直试图要保有这种政治上的影响力。
So church has been using politics as a way of engaging with the culture, with the country, with the people.
所以从那以后，教会就开始利用文化利用它的势力在文化当中来影响文化。
So Rod Dreher is the editor of American Conservative.
Rod Dreher 是美国保守家这一个杂志的编辑。
2 years ago, he declared Christians lost the culture war.
2年前，他就宣告说，基督徒在文化战争中已经打输了。
He wrote this book called The Benedict Option, Saint Benedict's Option, basically.
他写了一本书叫白尼迪克选项。
Actually, it's the retreat of the Christian back into the old world, the old way of living.
是说基督徒现在要撤退，回到从前的那种生活的景况。
He used a few examples to support, his claim, during the debate with, other theologians.
在跟其他的一些神学家辩论的时候，他举了几个例子来支持他的观点。
So in 2015, Supreme Court actually ruled, the gay marriage is legal.
他说，比方说，2015年美国最高法院是说裁定同性婚姻合法。
The worst is that, President Trump, his first nomination to the Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch, actually wrote it's a 6-3 decision that there is, they have to protect, the gay, in terms of their right to work, the employment.
川普总统他的第一个最高法院所提名的这个法官，他在2020年就曾经诠释这个法律，支持说他们有这个权利，应该支持。
This is totally out of the expectation of all the evangelical right that somebody, on the conservative side will vote, in Supreme Court in that decision.
这大大出乎许多福音派人士的意外，因为在他们心目中，这一位保守的大法官居然是站在了自由派的那一面。
There's so much confusion and disappointment when President Trump lost his re-election bid last year.
在去年川普总统连任失败的时候，也引来了极大的混乱极大的不安。
Well, you can see that there's a lot of that type of non-biblical and also out of the context use of the Bible to support this aggressive approach.
你可以看到，在这个过程当中，许多人将圣经断章取义，取出来支持他们的这种非常侵略性的这种文化反击。
So during the 2016, President Trump's first election bid, and there was a big argument, among the church members.
在川普总统第一次当选总统2016年的时候，教会内有个极大的争论。
They were debating whether they should support, President Trump for the president bid, because he is actually promoting building the wall in the southern border so to keep, illegal immigrant coming in.
当时的一个争论就是说，关于是不是在南方修墙挡住非法移民这件事。
So the pastor stood up in the meeting and basically quote Nehemiah chapter 2.
在这样一个辩论当中，有一个牧师就在辩论会中站起来，就引用尼希米第2章。
So come, let's build a wall of Jerusalem and not live with this disgrace any longer. I told them how God was supporting me and how the king was backing me up.
他就念说：“来吧，我们重建耶路撒冷的城墙，免得再受凌辱。我告诉他们，我神施恩的事怎样帮助我。”
So he proclaimed that, you see, God is not, against building the wall.
他引用尼希米记建造这城墙说：“你看，神并不反对在南部修墙。”
This kind of crazy that the way that you use the Bible to support some political cause out of context.
所以他就是这样公开的用这个圣经来断章取义，来支持他的政治观点。
Sorab Amori is a Christian writer for First Things, it's a website there, and also the New York Post.
Sorab Amori 也是一个基督徒的作家，他是纽约邮报和这个首要事情的这个编辑。
He has a very progressive and very aggressive, culture war strategy.
他在这个所谓的文化战争中采用的也是非常激进的方式。
So he wanted to defeat the enemy, the liberal side, in the public square, basically in politics.
他要想在公共的领域，特别是这个辩论的时候，能够打败他的对手，就是自由派。
He promoted the use the liberals' game, against them.
他就是要他提议说。用这个自由派的这个方式来打败他们。
And the liberals using many different tools to discredit, the Christians, and also the conservative side.
因为这些自由派用不同的方式想要来诋毁要来攻击保守派的名誉。
And this is what you're seeing now in trying to weaken and destroy, the conservative institutions.
你可以看到他们用各样的方式想要来打击、减弱保守派的根基。
And he's willing to use the unchristian method, to secure Christian ends.
所以他提议说，我们要用不符合圣经的方式来保卫我们的基督徒的权利。
He's totally disagree with, David French is another Catholic philosopher and writer.
他在这点上与David French 另外一位天主教的神学家完全有不同的看
And
法。
he's following the Catholic Church all the many centuries focusing on religious liberty.
因为那一位神学家就是遵循天主教的传统来追求宗教自由。
And that's what, most of the conservative group in the United States are using the Constitution that we have, because the freedom or the right to worship.
这是为什么基督徒的辩护者都是引用美国的宪法说我们有信仰自由、宗教自由，
And freedom of assembly and freedom of worship.
有聚会的自由，有敬拜的自由。
And that is what they call the right, similar to the liberal side using the Constitution right, for the gay marriage, for the abortion and all those things.
那其实呢，自由派也是用同样的宪法保护的权利来保证同性恋的权利和他们的那些权利。
This type of approach actually causing a lot of problem within the church, especially for average Christians. They're very confused.
用这样的方法来为双方的不同的立场来辩护，在教会里头就引起了许多的混乱。
Recently, with the COVID-19, they kind of raised up, another issue, about different classes, different type of people, how to react, in the culture.
最近的新冠疫情又带来了一些的争论，在不同的人群不同的集体之间的如何来做。
This is more a social issue, but become a cultural issue and become a Christian issue.
这本来是一个社会上的一个问题，现在变成了一个文化中的难题，进而成为教会中的一个问题。
So how is the people dealing with, the COVID-19 situation? You're quarantined at home, and in your different, economic system or economic level, how do you deal with it? What the kind of problem you're facing with?
所以在新冠要隔绝的时候，不同的阶层、不同的收入这些人他们是要怎么样来面对这样的一个规定？
It become a political problem also.
这成了一个政治上的议题。
So basically, the wealthy, can stay in the vacation property during the quarantine time.
那些富有的人可以在他们度假的地方就很自在的隔离。
And they can jet off, on their private jet to different, part of the world so that they can have, the quarantine there.
他们甚至可以搭乘私人的喷射机到一些私人的领地，然后在那里就隔绝了。
And the middle class actually stay at home because they have to work at home and they deal with their children, which is restless in a way, and because they cannot go to school.
而中产阶级呢，他们就在家隔离，他们可以一边上班一边照看孩子，这些孩子也非常的不好弄。
The big issue is more on the working class.
但是最有麻烦的是这些工人阶级。
They don't have the financial support to be able to quarantine, so they have to work. But now they have to deal with, the risk of, infected by COVID at the same time. The children will be home.
他们没有资源说可以在家里隔离，他们必须出去上班，但是呢，就要面对感染的风险，而且呢，孩子要留在家里，没人看。
But people do not understand, even though there are 3 separate groups, they're all interconnected.
人们没有意识到这三大类不同的人其实是互相关联的。
And talking about COVID, guideline, we have to wear masks.
在谈到这个新冠的这个指南的时候，我们有戴口罩的指示。
It's so confused yesterday when CDC announced that now you don't have to wear masks. Now, if you are fully vaccinated.
所以这个疾病控制中心刚刚出的这个规定也让人很糊涂因为这个你如果完全接种免疫了，你就可以不戴口罩。
But what about those, unvaccinated? How do you know which one, who is unvaccinated when you go into a room, when you walk outside the street?
但是谁知道说你不戴口罩是真的已经接种疫苗，还是说没有？谁也不知道。
I think to save the world, to save life, we need to have to work together. Whether you are wealthy, whether you're in the middle class, whether you are the working class.
所以为了让我们都能够从中间得救，我们这个不同的阶层，富有的中产阶级和工人阶级都应该同心合力。
Whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're color.
无论你是黑的、是白的、是任何的肤色。
I think that the argument definitely because most of the black, of the color, are the working class.
因为大多数的有色人种，他们其实是在低层。
And people think, most of the wealthy are the white.
而一般人认为说，在富有阶层中，白人比例很高。
The pandemic or the cure require everybody to cooperate.
在疫情之下，需要大家同心合力。
So people are thinking about, well, if you follow the guideline, you're helping to save life.
人们说，你只要照着疾病控制中心的规定，就可以救命。
You have to take the responsibility to save life for the others, not only for yourself.
我们要有责任说，为了救别人，也不仅仅只是为了救自己，我们要采取行动。
So wearing your mask become not only a responsibility, it's really an altruism that you are saving life for the others.
所以戴口罩不但是我们的责任，也是一个利他，是一个救别人的一个举措。
It's not just a demand for for justice, so that instead of ruin somebody else's life.
并不只是说我们要公平，我们要公义我们就用这个理由来让别人受苦。
That's why there's a lot of debate about why there's not much of infection in China compared to so many infection in U.S. because the two culture total difference.
这是有很多的讨论说，为什么在中国没有像美国有这样大量的人感染呢？这是因为两个文化完全不同。
Because basically in the United States you have freedoms. People all have their own. I'm my own person.
因为美国是讲究自由的，每个人都是都是为了自己的自由。
In a socialistic or communistic country, you follow the leaders.
在
Or
一
you're going
个
to be in
社会主
jail.
义或者共产主义国家，都是统一化，按着上面的指示。
It's very hard to push this kind of altruism in the United States.
然而，在美国，你要是想要这种统一的这种为了帮助别人采取的统一的行动，确
What
实
is
很难
mine
推
is
动。
mine. What is yours is yours.
我的就是我的，你的就是你的，各不相干。
Then what happened in church? Why church is failed is so often, in the modern culture?
为什么在教会里头常常在教会里在现代化的社会中常常会有失
Especially
败？
in America, the last 100 years is you can see a lot of problem with the church decline.
特别是在美国过去100年，你看到教会这个在迅速的衰败，
We've failed to engage the culture.
在与文化的影响力当中失败了。
In 1920, there's a secular humanism is going on, the movement.
在1920年，有这样一个世俗的人文学者，他们开启了一个运动。
Right around right after the Korean War, right around the Vietnam War, you can see, this liberalism, start to prosper in the United States. Those are the flower children.
在韩战和越战的那个年代没多久，这个自由主义就开始在美国泛滥。
And then you have sexual, revolution, you have cultural revolution, you have rebellious, activity, protest, demonstration all around the campus, college campuses.
所以在那个时候，大约在校园里头就开始有所谓的性开放自由运动这样的觉醒，这样的大规模的游行、反战的示威，到处都是。
Today, the chicken coming back, to roost, basically. Liberalism become, we have the children of the liberalism, in our midst, in the culture now.
所以那个时候的自由主义者现在长大了，他们的孩子也生出来了，就是自由主义的后裔。
And because the church has missed the chance to engage with the culture.
因为教会失去了与文化影响文化的这个机会。
And the Johnson Amendment become a problem for church too. Even our church have discussed about tax deduction issue.
这样的一个江森法案也变成了一个问题。
We gave up our chance, our speech in a way or involvement because we want to maintain the the tax exemption status.
作为教会必须放弃发言权来换取免税条件。
So now we become silent, in politics as well in the public, and humanism fill in the void.
所以在公众领域就失声了，以至于被人文学者们占领了阵地。
And church growth become important.
教会仍然会再次变得重要。
And the liberals are more committed than us as the conservative or Christians.
而且教会中的自由派也比保守派会更善于推销。
And church are shifting from the gospel message to motivational messages.
所以教会也渐渐从福音的信息变成只是一个鼓励人的这样的一个辅导性的行业。
And church also moving, into chase the American dream, especially for Christian, wealth, happiness, and health.
教会也在整体上开始去追求所谓的美国梦，一个成功神学。
Evangelical basically form a lot of political party. First of all, like Moral Majority Christian Coalition in the 70s, to chase after president, or congress and senator, so that they can dominate the politics.
所以教会里头也有这种新兴的所谓的道德的大多数的这些政党团体，以教会的为号召力，要来获得更多的政治影响力。
Church is divided within.
所以教会中间就开始分裂。
I can see some of our members in our church are divided also.
我们教会里头的一些的会员也有因此而分裂。
I can see in cell group, during the last 2 or 3 cycles of election, people debate.
在我们教会的小组里，在过去的2、3个总统选举中，小组聚会当中都有为此的而产生的
The
辩论。
white Christians think that gay marriage, pro-abortion, Supreme Court are most important issues.
那些白人基督徒，他们认为说同性婚姻堕胎最高法院，这都是一定要攻下来的阵地。
Big government is bad, for solving property, education, and social service.
他们认为说这个大政府对于解决贫穷、解决这个国家的难题是一个非常糟糕的选项。
Tax cut is important for economy, for bringing people from poverty up into wealth.
他们也认为减税是要这个帮助穷人提升国民富裕的一个很重要的手段。
Non-white Christians have different idea. They think the most important issue is economics and also social justice.
但是非白人的基督徒，他们有不同的看见，他们认为说这个社会公义和这是更重要的议题。
They think government intervention is important, and also they believe in redistribution of wealth, from the wealthy, to the poor.
他们认为说政府的干预是必不可少的，而且他们相信说重新分配财产是好的事。
And they believe, private sector, companies, and industry, and more focus on making money instead of helping people.
他们相信说这些大型的企业，他们更多是被利润所驱逐，而不是想要来帮助其他的人。
Even with all this division of idea, but most Christians agree, like the issue about abortion, marriage, and disagree about the strategy to solve all this problem.
虽然有这些不同的看见，但是大多数的基督徒都在婚姻、都在堕胎上都有相似的看见，只不过对于所采取的策略有不同的看法。
Church need to solve this problem, otherwise we're not united, and then we cannot really engage effectively with the culture.
教会需要面对解决这些的问题，否则我们不能够合一来影响这个社会。
Most Christian tends to judge the people outside the church.
大多数的基督徒都有这种论断、审判的心态来面对世人。
And judge, those people in the secular culture.
同时也审判那些在世俗文化当中的人。
Yeah, Brother Matthew this morning read these 2 passages, especially in 1 Corinthians. We are not supposed to judge people outside the church. It's up to God who judge.
我们今天所读的这个经文哥林多前书，我们不是要论断教外的人，我们是论断教内的人。
So Jesus had taught way back when, when he was on earth, 2,000 years ago, how to engage the culture.
耶稣其实在2000年前，在他在世上行走的时候，已经教导我们如何来参与到文化当中。
We're not supposed to be shy. We're not supposed to actually retreat, not to engage with the culture.
我们不是要好像害羞要躲起来。
It's just like the Amish. Okay, they have their own secluded, community. You can see a lot of those in Pennsylvania. They don't associate, engage the culture at all.
就像如果你去滨州旅行，那边有阿美士人，他们就是自我封闭，与世隔绝。
But that's not what Jesus taught us. Even a culture is sinful, we still need to engage them.
但这不是耶稣教导我们的。就算是我们生活在一个罪恶的世界当中，我们也不是要隔绝。
Look at the world that Jesus lived in at the time.
只要看一看耶稣当年所生活的世界，
Abortion and homosexual behavior for men are legal at the time.
那个时候堕胎，那个时候同性恋都是合法的。
And Jesus continued to preach to them.
耶稣仍然向他们讲道。
Even though he has not been in Rome, he has not been in Athens, but he has been preaching to the people around in Jerusalem. He taught his disciples so that he can preach to the other people.
虽然他自己没有去过罗马，没有去过雅典，但是他教导他的门徒，让他们去教导别人。
In his preaching, he never prescribed and also expect his disciple, his follower or Christian to basically change the culture.
在他的教导和指示当中，他从来没有让他的门徒去要改变那个世俗的文化。
But he just wanted witness to the culture, witness to the people out in that region.
他只不过是让他们在这样的文化当中向他们见证。
And then he never taught them to protest, to boycott, and people send in lawsuits, sue them, or use violence act.
他从来没有让他们去抗议、去抵制、去告他们、去用这些暴力的方式去攻击他们。
And Jesus taught when you engage with the culture, don't follow them, don't perform the sinful act.
耶稣告诫他们说：“当你们向世人传福音、做见证的时候，不要效法他们。
Why you need to engage with the culture?
但为什么你要如此与这个文化有这样的接触呢？
Why don't you want to dominate the culture, change the culture, or use use army to change them?
你为什么要影响、要左右，甚至要用军队武装来改变这个文
Because
化呢？
it's very clear that he proclaimed the kingdom was not of this world.
他已经很清楚的说，我的国不属于这个世界。
I don't need to win this world because my kingdom is not here. My kingdom is in heaven.
他说，我的国不属于这个世界，我的国是在天上。
So that is something that we have to remember as a Christian.
这是我们作为基督徒一定不可忘记的。
We should not take up arms. We should not focus on politics to win the world.
我们一定不能够拿起武器，一定不能够投入到政治的争斗。
We cannot conquer those promote abortion or homosexuality.
我们不能说用这样的征服那些支持堕胎、去征服那些同性婚姻的人。
And those people Jesus preached to are the common people, and they are the poor people. They are working class.
耶稣所传道的对象就是普通人，就是穷人，就是当时的工人阶级。
They have no political power.
那些人没有任何的政治
They
影
don't
响力，
even have wealth.
甚至也没钱，
They don't have any networks.
他们也没有什么人际
They
关系
don't
网。
have influences on the society, on the culture.
在当时的社会，他们都是一些毫无影响力的
They were
边缘人，
oppressed,
他们是被压迫的，
and they have nothing that they can hold on to.
他们一无所有。
It's not like us today. We have our house, we have our car, we have a career, we have something that we want to hold on to. We call it American dream.
不像我们今天在教会里头，我们有房子、有车子、有工作，我们有我们所谓的美国梦。
Pastor John Piper said it never occurred to those people at the time, they should complain, or protest or boycott, because they were persecuted, they were suppressed.
Piper 牧师曾经就说，在当时的基督徒，他们从来就没有想到过他们会去抗议、会去静坐、会去抵制，因为他们的权利受到了侵犯，他们本身就是被压迫的。
Think about, one of our missionaries, Yesu, he's ministered to the people, in Indonesia, which is a Islam country.
想一想，我们所支持的宣教士黑鼠，他去印尼传道，在那个地方都是穆斯林。
He's not supposed to change the moral, behavior of those people there.
他那里的使命并不是要改变当时社会的那个道德风气。
They were there, he and May was there to witness the people there so that they can accept Jesus as their personal savior.
所以他们夫妻在那里，就是要向当地的人见证， 让他们能够认识耶稣，能够接受耶稣作为他们个人的救主。
They are not responsible for the moral failing of Indonesia.
他们对于印尼的道德上的失败没有任何的责任。
And also here in the United States, we are not responsible for the moral failing of the United States.
同样在这里，我们对于美国江河日下的道德风气的失败也没有什么责任。
But we are responsible for moral failing of ourselves, our household, or our church.
但是我们对于我们自己、我们的家人、我们的教会里头的道德失败，却有不可推卸的责任。
So we have to really understand our focus, our responsibility.
所以我们必须清楚地明白我们的中心，我们的呼召。
So after the temptation, in the desert, by Satan for
在
40 days and 40 nights.
在耶稣在旷野40天禁食受撒旦的试探。
Brother Matthew preached on this a couple times ago.
几个礼拜之前，马太弟兄讲过道。
So he laid out the vision, for Christian how to engage, with the culture.
在那里头，耶稣也为我们立出了一个蓝图，如何与这个文化来相交。
Basically, we are the salt and light of the world.
我们是世上的盐和光，
But we are not supposed to raise up the army to fight the war, to fight the world,
但是我们并不是要起来呼召一个军队跟这个世界来硬杠，
because God's kingdom is not of the world, it's not in this world.
因为神的国不属于这个世界。
So we have to focus on being the light and the salt. I'm
So-
not going to talk too much about because Brother Matthew already explained it last time.
我不会说太多，因为马太弟兄上次已经讲了，我们主要的责任就是要做盐和光。
But just think about what salt will do.
你就想一想，盐是什么？
It's supposed to preserve, right?
是有保鲜的。
So be a salt and light cannot be too passive.
所以作为盐，作为光，你不能够太被动消极。
Pastor John spoke and talked about how to be salt.
这个约翰他谈过如何做盐。
When you use salt, to preserve meat, you have to rub the salt into the meat.
你如果要用盐来腌肉的话，你必须把这个盐都一直要抹到这个肉的各个地方。
So you don't just throw the salt, on the surface and then done.
你不是把盐往上一丢就不管了。
So we have to be proactively and actively to witness to to the people in the culture, but not in a way to use an army to fight them, to conquer them.
所以我们要真的跟这个文化相交，但是不是用军队，不是用这些进攻性的方式。
Same thing to be light of the world, you have to be able to shine light, in the darkness.
同样的道理，作为光，我们也要在黑暗当中能够发出来。
But not about those laser darts you can put some in the eyes and hurt somebody.
但是不是那种激光可以能够刺人家的眼睛，让人很不舒服。
So John Piper talked about when we do become salt and light, when we become witnessing, we're not supposed to huffing and puffing.
所以江派伯牧师说，当我们做盐做光的时候，我们不是在那儿用这种居高临下，用这种攻击性的，用这种方式
Protest, boycott, violence, and lawsuit.
用这种抗议、游行这个打官司，用这样的方式来与他们，
But with love,
而是用爱、
with tears,
用眼泪、
prayers,
用祷告
witnessing,
见证、
and perseverance is very important.
忍耐。
So we have to we know the damage of racism, right?
我们也晓得这个种族主义的祸害，
The exploitation of the poor.
我们也晓得欺压贫穷的
Our
不好。
church has been very, big failure in fighting the removing God from education, from school.
教会在抵挡说如何将神从社会从学校中除掉这个战役当中很
So
失
we
败。
more actively maybe in the future I get a chance to talk about how to engage in education.
所以呢，我们也许以后有机会更多的来讨论如何能够夺回教育的阵地。
So not only Jesus taught of it, also Paul has taught, how to engage with the culture.
不但耶稣教导，使徒保罗也教导如何来影响文
He
化。
talked about Jesus refused to call down his legions of angels to fight a war for him.
他提到说，耶稣拒绝从天上叫异营的天兵来征战。
He stayed quiet when he was persecuted.
当他被被迫害的时候，他静默无声。
Be clear that when we be silent, be passive in a way, even though we do witnessing, there will be cost associated with it.
就算是我们这种被动的做见证，都是要付代价的。
A lot of Christians in the church do not want to do that.
教会很多的人不愿意这样付代价。
They don't want to, basically pay the cost.
不愿意付代价。
You want to fight a battle to win the war so that you can keep your American dream, so that you can preserve your lifestyle.
我们想要参与这些各种各样的政治运动，能够保守我们的权利，可以继续过我们的美国梦生活。
Paul explained very clearly that is how Jesus did it.
保罗告诉我们说，耶稣是这样做的。
He stayed silent, but he paid for, his silence. End up crucified on the cross.
他静默无声，而且为此付上代价，就是被钉在十字架。
So the way that we engage with the culture, we need to think twice about we very progressive or aggressive way of engaging.
所以，当我们与这个世俗文化来相交的时候，我们必须要三思，是不是要用那些非常进攻性的、攻击性的策略。
God's kingdom is not in this world.
神的国不在这个世界。
Why we're fighting?
你争什么？
Why we're fighting to win this kingdom does not belong to us.
为什么要去争夺这个不属于我们的这个国家？
So Jesus is very clear that we're not engaging in culture war.
所以耶稣已经非常清楚，我们不是要打一场文化战争。
And we have to remember we're not citizens in this world.
我们必须也要提醒，我们不是这个世界的公民，
We're citizens in heaven, in the heavenly kingdom.
我们都是天国的子民。
Don't get distracted, by all the survival method, as Christian in this world.
所以作为基督徒，不要被这个到处现在流行的这些道理所迷惑。
Paul's really talking about we are only foreigners in this world.
保罗告诉我们说，我们在这世上算是寄居的，是移民，
We are visitors.
我们是访客，
We are immigrants for temporary purpose, and then we go back to the heavenly kingdom.
我们是非永久居民，然后我们就要回到我们真正的家园。
Well, some people argue that, we got to stop, evil spreading in this world.
有人会反驳说，我们要制止这个世界上的罪恶的猖狂。
It's not our job.
我们并不是呼召要来做这件
Our
事，
job is to be a good witness for Jesus in this world.
我们被呼召的使命是要做耶稣的见证。
We don't judge the people outside the church.
我们不去审判教会之外的那些人。
And I said it many times before, we don't throw the Bible at people.
就像我以前常常用的这句话，我们不会用圣经去到处去拍人，
But our behavior, our action, and our speech is very important as witness to the non-believers.
但是我们的生活、我们的态度、我们的话说的话，却是无比的重要，是我们
It's
对别人
God
做见证。
himself that is the judge. He will judge the world. He will judge the people outside the church.
神他是真正的审判，只有他是一定要来审判教外的这些人。
So we are supposed to be witness to preach the gospel.
所以我们只是见证人，我们只要专注于来传讲福音，
And become salt and light.
在这个世界上做盐和光。
And historically, the Christian actually show love to the world. I mentioned before in the preaching about COVID-19.
在以前讲到，我也提到过，这在历史上，教会基督徒就是一直以爱来向这个世界彰显。
Even Spurgeon, and his wife, spent a lot of time dealing with the people, sickness in London.
就是有名的牧师施布珍和他的妻子都花了大量的时间来帮助伦敦当时那些病人。
What they express is love for the non-believer,
他们所流露出来就是那些对未信主人的爱，
the people in need.
对那些在患难当中需要帮助的人。
Paul was persecuted and got stoned, almost get killed, by the people that he preached to.
保罗被逼迫，甚至被 那些人快要打死了，就是他不断向他们讲道的那些人。
Even after he was persecuted and beaten up, he called them brothers, and fathers.
就算是他这样被人打得头破血流之后，他站起来讲道，还称呼他们父兄啊。
And he actually, he said, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. How can you do that?
圣经中告诉我们说，我们的敌人若饿了，就给他们吃，怎么样能够做他？
If he's thirsty, give him something to drink.
如果他饿了，渴了，就给他喝。
This is counterintuitive, to people. It's also to question.
这是违反人性，甚至我们基督徒有时候都违反。
This is basically is the driving force, the motivation for us to engage with the culture is love. We need to have that love for people.
然而，这是我们基督徒与这个文化相交的主要的力量，这是最关键的，我们就要显出这样的爱来。
Just the love of God for us is the same way.
因为神对我们的爱是同样的爱，只有这样的爱。
So the first commandment is love God.
所以最大的诫命就是爱神。
And the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself.
其次的也相反，就是要爱人如己。
So brothers and sisters,
弟兄姐妹，
so we're seeing the church have failed to engage the culture correctly in the right way.
我们看见教会在与文化的相交当中失败。
We as Christians are confused and also divided.
作为信徒，我们也迷失方向，也有纷争。
So we got to change our course, change our ways, change our strategy.
所以我们要改变我们的方向，我们要改变我们的策略。
We need to go back to what Jesus taught in the first century, to the first church, his follower, to the Christian, how to engage the culture today.
我们要回到耶稣的教导，在第一世纪，在第一间教会，他们是如何来与我当时的文化相交。
So I suggest the followings.
所以我的提议就是接下来，
Engage but not follow the culture.
就是我们要积极的投入，但是呢，却不效法这个文化，
And be salt and a light to the world.
对这个世界做盐和光。
So pray for this vision
所以为这样的意向来带导，
and fix our eye on Jesus all the time.
我们单单注目在耶稣身上，
Spend the time to dig into God's word.
花时间来在神的话语上深造。
We need to unite as a church, as God's people.
所以作为神的百姓，我们这个教会应当合一。
Does not mean that we cannot engage in politics. Individually, you should. I think the church should not.
这并不是说要跟政治完全的脱钩。作为个人你可以，但是
You
作
could
为
be a
教会我们
senator,
不
you
应
be a
该。
congressman, you can still be Christian.
你可以做身为国会的议员，仍然做一个基督徒。
Do not judge the non-Christians.
不要随意的论断审判那些不信主的人。
And rely on God every day.
每一天倚靠神。
Let's pray.
让我们来祷告。
Lord, we give you thanks for who you are.
主啊，我们谢谢你为你所事而谢谢
And
你。
thank you for your kingdom is not as this world.
我们也谢谢你，你的国不属于这个世界。
And thank you for being the real judge
也谢谢你，你是那真正的审
so
判
that
官。
we don't judge the others.
我们不审判别人，
But we judge those people inside the church.
但是我们确实要审判那些在教会内的。
But we judge with love.
我们是在爱中审判。
Let's go back to your love so that we can love our neighbors, and love others.
让我们回到你的爱里头，这样我们也可以同样的去爱我们的邻舍，
Help us so that we can be salt and light to the world,
帮助我们，让我们在这世上做盐和光，
so that we can glorify
我们可以荣
and
耀，
glorify you, and by extending your kingdom.
能够因此而扩展神的国。
We pray all this in Jesus' name.
奉耶稣基督的名祷告。
Amen.